Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's your boy Belton here. I know it's been a while since my last video. I've been playing Crucible pretty heavy, and I thought it'd be a good time to kind of catch you guys up on what's been going on this league, what I've been pursuing, what the guild's been up to, and just sort of how things have been going, as well as throw some data at you guys that I've been working on for quite a little while here. So similar to the last video, I put together a bit of a PowerPoint here just to keep myself kind of on track and prevent myself from drifting a little bit. So let's just jump right into it. You can see here the title of the video. And we've got synthesis rerolling, mirror crafting, and the league so far. Pretty vague, so we're going to be touching on a few topics here, but definitely some interesting stuff. I know a few of you have been checking in. I've been live streaming quite a bit on YouTube, but they're disjointed, and my hours are pretty all over the place. So hopefully this can clarify some things, and at the end of the video, we're going to go over some stuff that I've been assembling information and data for hundreds of hours and over quite literally dozens and dozens, if not 100 plus mirrors worth of beasts and crafting. So there's some meat to it as well. Anyways, let's jump right in. So what are we going to talk about in this video? Quick recap, as I said, of what I've been up to this league. Did suffer a bit of a defeat early on, but gathered ourselves and we made a pretty good comeback. As the title of the video states, I have spent 43 mirrors of beast crafting this league, collecting data, putting things together, and we'll go over what the results of that have been. Afterwards, we'll go over some actual specifics with respect to the data. And when I mentioned the meat of the video, synthesis crafting in particular with Vivid Vultures, a recent addition as of last league. There isn't really any good sort of definitive guide on that, and so it's been a back of the mind ambition for myself to kind of put something together in a way that is both vetted and a large enough sample size that it's trustworthy source of information. And again, so that's a cumulative data that I've collected over the past two leagues, and I'm comfortable at this point, I think, sharing what I've learned and hopefully can impart some of that advice towards you guys too in a way that you can implement in your own gameplay, or at the very least get a better understanding for. And then again, probably have some general musings on the state of crafting, how things have been going, etc. So as most of you know, to begin the league, first 3 days I actually was incredibly successful. I geared out pretty much an entire discharge character. Most of the gear, in fact, actually I'm wearing here on my character is from the third day of the league or prior. If you look here, I just recently started clearing out the Atlas, but I still don't even have all of my Void Stones yet, nor do I have my maps unlocked. No, it's not level 100 yet either, actually. As of a couple days ago, was as low as level 91. So the early focus of the league was 100% on crafting. And the big first thing that we went for, and when I say we, I mean myself and my guild, and I'll elaborate on that after this, but highly publicized, perhaps a little early on my part doing so, cue the humble pie. But the goal at the start of the league on the onset was to make the #1 Fizzbo. And as of the third day of the league, that was something we put a heavy amount of focus onto. By day 3, I had roughly, let's say, 3 mirrors of currency accumulated. And this was the base starting point for pursuing that craft. What you can see here up on the screen is the furthest state that I got the bow to. This was roughly 1 week into the league. And the rule that you can see there is flaring with a T4 hybrid merciless. And then we've got on the implicits there 8% attack speed, which is tier 1, 7 to 10, which is tier 2, and 19%, which is also, no, that's tier 3, sorry. That is tier 3 Fizz. The rule in terms of max at this point would have been at around 1700 PDPS. The tree, which you can't see here, is also perfect. Shout out to Quiddy for putting that together and figuring that out early on. Now, we probably could have put this bow out in its current state since we did so very quickly. And, maybe collected a couple of mirror services, but the ambition really was to get, the best possible bow, and as it's presented in the photo there, that would have been one that would have been very quickly overtaken. That being said, the pursuit itself was very costly in both time and currency. Myself, I spent as of day 3, for the first 3 days, I spent gearing my character, doing some things independently. including which was running 260 memories of harvests. And I was getting my guild kind of accustomed to doing that. Over the past couple of leagues, I've been collecting data on that and found out, some interesting price points and margins and whatnot. And very early on, was doing so in a full group to the tune of roughly a third a mirror an hour in profit. And so there were some ways to kind of expedite that process in terms of, formatting, getting the maps down, 3 minutes per memory, which maps to pick, which layouts, bottling beasts, listing them, bulk buying, blah, blah, blah. A bunch of things that I just kind of wanted to get habitually put into the group of people that were participating. On the onset, though, the currency was primarily supplied by myself. And then once I started crafting, and I've got to accept fault here. One of the tactical decisions or flaws that I made in my decision-making process was, as I said, I spent about 2 weeks crafting this bow. And really what I should have done probably was spend maybe a week to 10 days putting currency together and then doing it in one sitting. I'm used to crafting things in the past, usually in a day or two to finish a mirror craft. I was a little naive going into this, thinking about the timeline here, and spending 2 weeks not only spending the currency that I had to craft the bow, but as well removing myself from a situation where I could generate currency by virtue of the fact I was literally playing 20 hours a day for 2 weeks straight just crafting. That means, we're losing on both ends, because not only am I spending, but I'm also not generating. And so after I ran out of currency myself, the total cost we spent, amount we spent, I should say, was roughly, it was about 21 mirrors. That being said, though, mirrors at the time starting were around, I think 120 divines each. In real divine currency, it was about 3,000 divines, which is not meaningless. However, for those you who have questioned, the source of the revenue, blah, 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 where did the currency come from? About 10 mirrors of that was my own currency that I had generated. And as well, I did actually put in about 200 hours of my own time. So it was not like, the bow craft was something that was failed due to lack of effort, not only by myself, by a lot of other people as well. And that brings me to my next point, which is just kind of give a brief overview of how my guild works. It seems like this is a habitual thing these days, but TFT has levied a claim that there's some kind of Ponzi scheme going on, or the guild is ripping blah blah blah, ripping off viewers, and this is just patently false. The name of my guild, which is, by the way, Hall of Fame first ballot pun, is called Goldrim Sachs, which is obviously a play on words of Goldman Sachs, an investment bank IRL. And in that spirit, our guild works as well. You can see here on the left there, I have a photo of our guild charter. And the whole point of the guild essentially is to have pooled currency to work on things that, scale well, right? So things that, let's say you're double corrupting in powers, right? Awakened in powers. If you know that mathematically it's profitable over time, but it's hard to get 500 divines by yourself, right? But with 5 people sharing that, putting up 100 divines each, you can offset variance, right? So that was like the initial principle, and then we obviously got into things like mirror crafts and whatnot. Now, to clarify, there are the 3 ranks in the guild. There's the initiates, the members, the officers, and then obviously myself as the leader. Initiates are just people in the guild who are, fans of the YouTube, fans of stream when I had one, more just casual sort of social players. And these are people that are not involved in any level. Now, purely on a voluntary basis, the next level are equity members. And these are people who have taken the initiative to say, look, I want to get involved in either mirror crafts or in projects, as I just mentioned, things like the Awakened in Power or whatever. And we have a separate channel for that. Obviously, it's hidden from the public. And that's where we discuss strategies, tactics, whatnot. And that second little gray photo there, you can see I've got it circled, Equity Crucible. So the people that were involved in this project, it's not, hapless, unwitting people that are being taken advantage of. We'd actually planned this before the league even started. We had 25 people that were willing and wanting to try and accomplish this goal together. Now, as the leader of that, I have to bear that cross. There were many mistakes that I made in terms of, approach, especially in the management of that many people. I think it was probably a little bit too much. But in terms of participation, currency, and things like that, the top right photo there, you can see is a self-reported equity contribution list, which is a document that is shared in that channel where everyone lists what they're putting in, both in time and in currency themselves. And this is actually monitored I have no involvement in that at all. And that's an important part for me because I don't want recency bias or any personal biases I have, to play any part in that. So there's actually officers who manage that. And that function of the guild is actually a completely self-sustaining system, irrespective of me. Now, I know it probably sounds like I'm going into this quite a bit. And part of it is that obviously I wanted to clear the air for myself, but I think it innately devalues and is insulting to the amount of time and effort and planning that many people put in to pursuing these things, to simply write them off as people that were being scammed or taken advantage of. It's not the case. Now, obviously we didn't end up getting the result that we wanted. The bow was crafted in a better state first by an individual person who I actually spoke to and congratulated the time that he did that. He hit tier 3, tier 1, and was just playing by himself, which is an incredible feat. And I can't take anything away from him. And when we spoke, I've seen on public channels, maybe not as gracious, but the conversation we had was very cordial, and he actually said he admired what we were attempting to do as a guild. And I told him I had nothing but respect for his capacity to do that as an individual player. And, regardless of how things ended up, that remains the case. And then obviously, eventually, if you've been keeping up with it, you saw that TFT hit a 3T1 prefix bow with a perfect synth and tree. Now, aside from the fact that we just kind of straight up got beat, it is worth mentioning we were rather unlucky, especially when you juxtapose the contributions and time and currency that we put in, or more specifically I put in because I was doing all the crafting myself, and so I was tracking this the entire time. The TFT 321 bow, they said publicly that they spent 7 mirrors on it, and the guy who hit the tier 3 tier 1, I know he spent about 150 Kraychik Chimerals to hit that tier 3 tier 1. For some perspective, I used 1,500 Kraychik Chimerals without even getting the synthesis done. We spent collectively, again, 21 mirrors at the mirror prices at the time. Now, again, I don't want you to think 21 mirrors in current prices. It was about 3,200 divines. But, that's just the way it falls sometimes. The physical bow is a very competitive market. And everyone that was participating in that craft was very aware. And one thing I made sure of throughout the whole time, especially at the onset, was letting people know that the mirror craft is essentially a zero-sum game, right? If we get beat, if we make, let's say, a tier 2 and then tier 1, and somebody crafts a tier 1, that item is basically dead. Or if somebody flat out beats us to it, in terms of time, it's basically a dead craft, and there's no return on that. And whether or not it worked out, everyone that was involved was aware of this. Now, obviously, everyone has optimism, and maybe there's some naivete on some people's parts. I obviously can't vet the experience of every single person. Not like in a very, I'm not sitting there and grilling them, doing an interview kind of thing. But at the same time, it was not a situation where anyone was being taken advantage of. Unfortunately, sometimes, you pursue something meaningful and you don't end up getting there. And so, for the next slide, gotta swallow some humble pie and accept what is, right? So I had spent, as I said, 2 weeks playing almost 20 hours a day. And I'm not being hyperbolic there. Literally, I put everything I had into that. And so I have no regrets with respect to the effort. We just straight up got beat. A little bit of poor luck, a little bit of bad planning on my part, and definitely some things I would change if we were to pursue this again. But at the end of the day, separating the artist from the art for a second here, the TFT team made a fantastic weapon, fantastic bow. I have my qualms with them personally and what they represent as an organization, but the item for what it is great. I think it's extortionate, the prices they charge on them. But obviously prerogatives lie where they do. I know a lot of people have been coming to me every time I've been streaming and basically been saying, Belton, can you finish the bow? Can you finish the bow? I don't want to pay a 2 mirror fee. And just to clarify the situation, I do still have the base. Actually, another point, when we lost the bow base, this is more of a gestural thing than anything. But I actually gave the base to the officers of the guild, just because, I didn't want people to think like, oh, we lost the bow base, now I'm just gonna keep this, finish it later, like fuck you guys, ha ha ha. You know, it was like, look, we lost out on it. It's not like it's worth nothing, but at the same time, the amount of currency it would take to get it to a state where it was competitive would be almost completely not useless, but let's say it would take probably 20 to 25 mirrors on average to get it to be three tier one with the +2 arrow and everything. Plus, we're not even done the synth on it, right? Um, and that's a loss in two ways. If I were to put that money into the bow, right, that's A, money that we're spending there. Now, B, it's also opportunity cost of where we could be spending those 25 mirrors in other crafts. As well, by the time I actually finished it, even if it were comparable or the exact same tier of mods, about 75% of the people who were going to mirror that bow to begin with would have probably already done so. Now, there were some small things that could have been changed, like I'm pretty sure they unveiled double damage instead of, you know, they're unlucky, I guess, instead of getting crit or attack speed. So you could still technically beat it with an attack speed or crit unveil, but they're very minutia things right there, and there's almost no way that that would have been able to be recouped. So also sensing, you know, some disillusionment with the people in the guild, and some obvious frustration and disappointment for the people who had put in the time and their faith and their hope, and understanding that, you know, I know on my end, I have no regrets personally about the effort I put in, the currency I put in. To give you an example, as I mentioned, in the first couple of days, I made 3 mirrors personally. I actually had 3 raw mirrors on me, and there was a period of time where nobody was online, and so I couldn't get Crucible Chimeras. You know, I was asking the guildmates. I'm sorry, a little quick tangent here too. Some of you, while I was streaming this early on in the league, you know, people thought I was taking maybe a harsh tone, or when I was like, guys, I need crate chicks, I need crate chicks. I think some people maybe interpreted that as me just like yelling at random viewers or guildmate, you know what I mean, with that expectation. And again, to clarify, the people who I was saying that to were the ones who were involved in this project. And when you are an equity member, you have an equal share as I do. So if we, a craft, let's say, cost 1,000 divines and you put in 100, you would own 10% of that. That's in perpetuity, 10% of all mirror fees, or if we sell the original base, 10% of that. You know, I put 0 value on my time, as well as 0 value on the effort, whatever, right? So it is actually a rather, you know, open process, but at the same time, sometimes I do get frustrated when I've been playing for like 20 hours, and something like rare beasts, you know, I run out of, which are, you know, relatively easy things to pick up. So anyways, I digress. There was a situation where we ran out of Crucible Chimeras. Nobody was online because it was the middle of the week, late at night. And I actually sold immediately 3 of my mirrors and went and bought 800 Crucible Chimeras. Right? And that was without a second of hesitation. It was like, this was an all-in process. And so I know that some people are disappointed we didn't get there. I'm disappointed too, I assure you, probably more disappointed than any other individual person. But at the same time, you need to recognize when is, you know, when you're doing something purely out of spite, and what is better for the collective, especially because I'm in a position where I have to think about other people, not only myself. Now, typically, the way that these equity projects works, they're on a per craft basis, right? That way, because as I mentioned, everything is on a voluntary basis. If you were on board for crafting, let's say, a mirror bow, but you didn't want to get involved on, like, let's say, a mirror belt, you'd have the option to opt in or opt out on the basis of what is being pursued. And that's for fairness sake, and, you know, also certain people have certain interests and whatnot. Feeling bad, though, about the fact that 2 weeks of not only my time, but literally thousands of hours of everyone else in the guild's collective time had nothing to show for it at this point. I made sort of a unilateral decision to do what I do best, and that's get some mirror crafting items that I know very, very well, and that is rings. At this point, we had no collective guild funds anymore. The only thing that was left over from the entirety of the craft were 400 vivid vultures were left. And that is a lot. That's not to downplay that. However, keep in mind, at the time, vivid vultures were about 40 to 50 chaos each, about 0.3 divines. So it was maybe 120 to 150 divines worth of vivid vultures, which is not nothing, but it's certainly not game breaking. As the title of the video says, I spent 43 mirrors subsequently crafting. And so the vast majority of that was actually all of that was done through individual pursuits on my end, sometimes taking personal loans from people that I know in the game outside of guild, But the reason I pursued that so vigorously is because I didn't want people who were getting involved in the mirror crafting process for the first time to be so disillusioned and disheartened that they put in all this time and effort early on in the league and they had nothing to show for it. And so I was like, you know what? If I can pump out a few other mirror crafts, I can at least start giving these guys some mirror fees. And so they can say, you know what? We didn't get the bow, but at least there's some ownership, there's some share, there's some sense of accomplishment. Now, for everything subsequent to the bow, it was not a situation where I was asking people for guild for anything. No crate chicks, no vultures, no everything. I went and purchased myself, just to clarify. And so, and that's not to disparage anyone in the guild by any means. But these were things. It was a decision that I made somewhat unilaterally. But it was really a twofold reasoning. Number one, if you were to look at the data from last league, the second highest mirrored item in terms of copies done after the fizz bows were actually the ring. And I know myself, last league, I actually crafted 8 mirror rings, 11 mirror items in total. And I did quite a few services on those. And I also have an immense database of vulture rules on those. In fact, with 100% certainty, I know beyond a measure of doubt that I have the most comprehensive data on this of any person in the game. And I've actually used over 20,000 vivid vultures on ring implicits. So as we move along here in the video, that will be the sort of core point that we're touching on an educational side of things. I know I've been kind of going on a little bit just to let you guys know what's been going on, but it is something that I'm asked about kind of on a daily basis. So I thought it was important to kind of clear the air there. And so yeah, as I wrote there, consideration for how to turn this around. I know that rings are something that I have a great deal of experience with. Just to kind of qualify myself for a second here, before I show you the rings that I made this league. I'm just going to show you a little collection. I arranged this ahead of time. Don't worry, I'm not going to have to search around for them. So here are the rings I've crafted in the past. This is from Calandra. 4 charges. Power charge, determination, onslaught. Frenzy power, spell power. T1 crit multi, power charge, onslaught. 7/7 LE weakness. Power charge, spell damage 6%. 4 charges. 4 charges, 2 power charges. 4 charges, 2 endurance. 4 charges, 2 endurance. 4 charges, 2 endurance. Onslaught, power charge, frenzy. 6T1 double power charge. Cold damage per frenzy, double frenzy, 6T1. Cold damage, double frenzy power, T1 life. 3 max charges, 2 min charges. Frenzy power implicit, power frenzy, etc. So you get the idea here. As well as just talking on other synth rolls. This is a mirror quiver I made last league, 6T1 with double +2 arrow. And as of last league, this was actually the best EDPS bow ever made. Obviously now with Crucible, that will no longer be the case. But this is a 1700 EDPS +3 bow that I made last league. This was kind of a meme project, although I did spend 2,600 vultures on it. I was trying to get power charge, frenzy charge on hit, and endurance charge when hit. Kind of as a discharge joke, and you can see there I've got the +1 curse that comes from the Delve mod, Lemire crafted discharge weapon, and a +1 arrow. Suffice it to say, I've spent a great deal of time on those rings, so I've got a good background there, in particular because I play discharge every league, and obviously one of the major sources of charges in terms of where you can get them. Aside from corruptions and on your tree, can be from synth rings or from precursors or the likes, right? So it is obviously something that I've had innate interest in over time, and once they added vultures, that obviously just compounded that interest because it kind of combined 2 things that I love, which are mirror crafting and discharge pursuits. So anyways, that is what is kind of informing my decision to sort of unilaterally say, look, I'm going to take these last 400 vultures. The bow had already been beaten at this point. And I was like, I'm going to pursue as vigorously as I can and independently and try and make as many mirrors as I can, or mirror items as I can. So anyways, for the next week, I pretty much no-lifed it, and I ended up making 6 mirror rings in 1 week. I spent... about 25 to 30 mirrors of currency making these. But I am so proud and so pleased with the results. A couple of them in particular are the greatest ever made for what they are, and are one of a kind. One of them actually, when I hit one of the implicit sets, I was literally, there's a video of it, I believe, on my YouTube community. My voice got all cracked and I was actually shaking because I was so excited. Yeah. Anyways, so I'll show you guys the rings now. On to go over a little brief story over what each one cost to craft and why I stopped there. So we'll swap back over to the game. So here we go. I'll start with the most impressive first rather than chronologically. This is the one specifically I was just talking about, guys. This is the first ever 777 Omni ring to ever exist. This was so exciting to hit. Last league, if you followed along, I spent hundreds of hours rolling fucking 7-7 rings trying to get this. It just, first of all, it looks obviously super cool. It's never existed before. This is the only one in existence. I just thought it's such an awesome base. However, after hitting the base, everything that went wrong could go wrong went wrong. This actually cost 2,960 divines to craft. I hit T1 WED, or sorry, what's it called now? EDWA 7 times. I failed the Ashling 4 times. And just to clarify, to hit tier 1 WED, or when I say WED, I mean elemental damage with attack skills. It used to be called weapon elemental damage. I'm going to keep saying WED just because it's the vernacular I'm used to, but in case that's confusing. Every time to hit tier 1 WED, if you were using the augment method with harvest, it cost approximately 181 divines, which at the time, by the way, was about a mirror. Or if you're using the double exalt method, it's a bit cheaper. But because you're using wild bristle matrons, it takes fucking forever because you have to go to the menagerie, double exalt, and then you do the, suffixes can't be changed, scour, go back up to the top, craft mana, double exalt, go back down. So you're just going up. So it is cheaper, but it just takes forever. And there's obviously a lot more variants using an exalt versus using the augment attack. So on top of having to hit tier 1 WED 7 times, as I mentioned, and failing Ashling 4 times, the prefixes, which are a range of 37 to 42 and 55 to 60, so that's 1 in 6 times 1 in 6, or 36 divines on average to divine it perfectly. I kid you not, and there were lots of people watching that can testify to this, it took 196 divines to hit 42 and 60. Again, it's 1 in 36, and it took 196. Over a mirror at the time to get that. I'm not a statistician, but somebody who was in chat said they ran it, and it was the bottom 0.02 percentile odds for that to happen. If there were 1,000 people, I would have been in the bottom 2 in terms of chance for that. Anyways, cost more than I expected to finish, but boy, am I happy with the craft. We've got that 6 tier 1 there. Of the chosen being, obviously people have asked me at certain points why we don't go for tier 1 life, natural to 79 life. First of all, 19 life being changed for 5.3 mana regen per second is actually not a bad trade-off. Obviously, base mana regen like that works like clarity, and so it scales mana regen percentage afterwards. Now, especially with Omni TS, which is predominantly where the mirror market lies, they're typically going to have, feed the Fury or fuel the whatever, the cluster jewel for mana leech, or, mana gained on hit or something like that. However, it's not a useless stat, but more importantly, it's about a 1 in 8 to augment tier 1 life. And as I mentioned, it costs on average using the augment method 181 divines to hit tier 1 WED. So you can then multiply that by 8 on top of that. Not to mention you also then have a 50-50 for removing the suffixes can't be changed. So it's 16 times 181. We're talking an additional 25 mirrors or something like that to hit tier 1 WED with tier 1 life natural versus the Ashling. And that's practically, like, that is the realistic reason why you never actually see 79 life and tier 1 wed. And that's universal across the board. If you go look at any of the mirror rings that have been made, that's going to be the case. So anyways, we hit this. This has actually been mirrored 18 times already. For some perspective, the Ellie bow that I made last league, number 1 Ellie bow ever made, that only got mirrored 19 times throughout the course of the league. TFT actually was so, I don't know if they were distraught or upset or anxious or whatever it was, but when I hit this ring, they actually sent out a news alert. Now, they didn't directly say Belton crafted this. They said, just so you know, some things look fancy but are not actually best in slot. For example, if we were to hit 777, which might look nice, it's actually a 0.2% DPS loss for our mirror tornado shot build. Look, there's probably legitimacy to that point. This is undisputed the best Omni ring ever made, period. Now, does that mean it's necessarily going to be the number 1 DPS Omni ring for a fully mirrored out tornado shot build using the exact same gear for PoE ninja flexing, primarily by RM tiers that would actually care or give a shit about a 0.2% DPS? Look, I'm not asserting that, but it is without a shadow of a doubt, and there's no competition, the best Omni ring ever made. And when I say Omni, I mean Omniscience, so the total amount that it provides. And again, I think that's been reflected in the amount of times it's been mirrored. 18 services now in 2 weeks. No signs of slowing down. I'm incredibly proud of this one. And, as I said, it took 2,960 divines to make, which at the time was roughly, I think, 14 mirrors. Part of what I sort of, as an ethos, represent as a crafter, it's not always about the bottom dollar for me. I actually set the mirror fee on this quite low, 100 divines. I wanted to make it accessible to other people. For me, there's no bigger compliment than somebody thinking you made something so cool that they want to copy themselves. But also seeing how extortionate TFT's prices are on certain things, as well as the fact they constantly scale them up to reflect the price of mirrors. This would have to be mirrored 30 times just to break even. Now, this is a base I'm never ever going to sell because it's one of a kind. But it's worth mentioning that this base by itself is probably worth 20 to 30, maybe even 40 mirrors. Again, it is one of a kind. And that's one thing you need to remember when you talk about mirror items, is that mirror fees work sort of like a dividend does on a stock, if you're familiar with the stock market. The underlying value, like the core value, is the equity itself, right? The dividend is just kind of a bonus, right? And so mirror fees, obviously, that's what you kind of, if you're looking to profit a great deal in temp leagues in particular, that's why there's such a strong pursuit for and such a competitive race to craft the first Fizzbo. About 75% of all mirror services are on a Fizzbo, which is why if you are mirror crafting subsequently afterwards, the most sensible thing to do is to craft towards Omni gear, right? Because it doesn't matter if you're a Fizz or an Ellie bow, both of them use Omniscience. As well, you also have things like Omni Word Loop, although I think this league in particular, Word Loop has switched towards using Ashes. Excuse me for a sec. However, you'll notice with the vast majority of the crafts I'm about to show you, they are geared towards Omni, which might seem kind of strange given that I'm playing Discharge. But that's the reason. Anyways, moving on to the next biggest ring, and if those of you last league who are watching might actually remember, I made a video called I Crafted the Rarest Ring Base Ever. Well, your boy fucking did it again. Frenzy charge, power charge, spell damage per power charge, 6T1. What more can I say? The odds of hitting this, getting the Frenzy and the power charge together, I'm going to go over the synthesis stuff at the end of this video, and you'll maybe get a brief appreciation for how rare this is. There are only 4 rings in the history of Path of Exile that have 2 charges. I now own 3 of them. The fact that I was able to hit this so early in the league. Last league, I did actually make this exact same base, but I didn't get it till 2 weeks remaining in the league. So to have this early while playing a Discharge character, what a blessing. And this has been mirrored several times already as well. So yeah, really happy about that one. Moving along here, you can see this one. We've got 7% dex, 7% dexterity, onslaught on hit. 61. This actually has a cheaper craft on it, though. I'll explain this in a minute, just after I go through them here. The next one, we've got 7% strength, frenzy charge, intimidate on hit. Again, with the 61. Here we've got 7% dexterity, frenzy charge, onslaught on hit, again with the 61. And here we've got strength percent, dex percent, power charge 61 with the wed. Now, when I say the cheaper craft, you'll notice that a couple of these rings, these two, have tier 1 weapon elemental damage with attack skills, and these ones just have the chosen. The cost difference on prefixes to do this craft versus this craft is so astronomical, I cannot express it really. I can, and I actually will. I don't know why I said that. But to get, as I mentioned earlier, to get tier 1 elemental damage with attack skills, cost on average about 180 divines. You then have to do a 50-50 for the Ashling. However, if you go this route, all you have to do is augment life, which is a 1 in 8, and then you go for a 50-50. So augmenting life costing about 15 to 20 divines to hit, and then a 50-50 thereafter. And you're guaranteed to hit the fire. Once you get the Ashling to hit, so it removes suffixes cannot be changed. If you then craft mana before unveiling, you're going to be guaranteed to get all 3 of the flat damage types. So fire, cold, cold, lightning. You'll get your choice. Whereas with the wed, or elemental damage with attack skills, you have to spend the 180 divines to get it, go through a 50-50 to get the life, and then even after you get the unveil, it's only a 75% chance to have life show up there. Because you can get all 3 of the flat damage types, even blocking mana, it's possible to still get all 3 damage types and not even have life as an option. So again, when you do see rings, the reason why some of these have the with the charge ring, it's a practical matter because spell damage per power charge, frenzy power charge. The flat elemental damage is not 2 attacks, it's all flat damage. So this obviously is more practical for a spellcaster than elemental damage with attack skills, which is obviously geared towards attack-based builds. But any of these rings that are in the Omni variant, the ones that I bothered to put the tier 1 elemental damage with attack skills, is because I thought there was a realistic chance of them being mirrored rather frequently. For ones like this, even though they're incredibly useful, a mod like Onslaught, which obviously has a lot of value by itself and a lot of utility, to an average person who's maybe getting their first mirror ever, they might see a ring like this and be like, oh, I love that ring, I want to get it. But when you're talking about profit mirror crafting, 90% of the market, unfortunately, is going to be people that get the best Fizzbow in the league. Most of them are going to be RMTing, and most of them only were going to be concerning themselves with their ranking on PoE Ninja's build list for DPS. So with respect to that, the only thing they're going to care about for the most part is min-maxing that damage. And so because of that, not a single one of them is going to have Onslaught on the ring. They're going to be using a Silver Flask with increased effect since they buffed it with the Mage Blood. And so Onslaught on a hit is a dead mod, for example, for those type of people, because in particular too, because of Calandra's Touch, they're going to want to mirror something like this ring where you can use Calandra's Touch and there's no lost effort. Something like the Strength Dex Power Charge as well, right? So you'll notice the ones that I have, this Intimidate on Hit, again, very good mod. Those people though, for the most part, are going to be getting that through a Timeless Jewel. And again, Onslaught here. Now, these mods are good enough, right? Onslaught on Hit, Intimidate on Hit. They're rare enough and they're good enough that it's not like I'm going to roll over those. But that's why the decision was made to not put tier 1 weapon elemental damage with attacks. Now, these are rings that I'll likely end up selling the bases for later on in the league for somewhere around 4 to 6 mirrors each. However, there's no reason to not put on the 6T1, especially if you're using T1 crit multi. It's actually significantly harder to get triple attributes. So you can see here we've got the essence, strength, intelligence, and dexterity. That is way, way harder to get than it is to get something like this where you have crit multi T1. And there's 2 reasons for that. Number 1 is that when you use the multi, it guarantees that, obviously. And then you have 3 total attributes you can pick, right? And you only need to hit 2 of them. So obviously hitting 2 out of a pool of 3 is much easier than when you have all 3 of them, where you have to hit 3 exact mods. And the more, really, the more contributing element of that is that you'll notice that crit multi, strength, and intelligence, it's a 1 in 5 times a 1 in 5 times a 1 in 5. That means that to divine the suffixes only cost 125 divines on average to hit them perfect. Whereas you'll notice that the essence tier 0 attribute is 51 to 58, which is a 1 in 8. So it's 1 in 8 times 1 in 5 times 1 in 5. So that small change there changes the average amount of divines it takes to divine the suffix from 125 to 200. So that's 75 additional divines. So not only is it significantly easier to hit those suffixes, it's also significantly cheaper to divine them. And I already went over how to do the prefixes. So to actually pump out the 6T1 on this, even though it looks a little flashy, it might seem like a waste given the fact that the large portion of the mirror market isn't really there in terms of profitability vis-a-vis services. It only costs about 100 divines to actually get it into this state. Now compare that to a ring like this, as I mentioned. Now this one was grossly poor RNG with respect to the 7 tier 1 elemental damage with attack skills, the 4 feral ashlings, going the 3 tier 1 on the suffixes with attributes, blah blah blah. But as I mentioned, this did cost 2,900 divines to craft, where these ones would cost about 100. So with respect to mirror fees too, all of these reasonably done. As I said, for myself, I like to have enough currency to be able to continue crafting. And since I was able to make all 6 of these, I'd also like to give some currency back to the guys in my guild. I've started to do that now that I finished crafting them. The last couple mirror services, you'll notice here I have a mirror fees from Belton, so I just throw currency in there, and then the officers distribute it amongst the people who took a leap of faith and jumped in on the bow. And that's mostly something done in good faith. It's realistically, 100 divine mirror fee distributed amongst 20 people is not nearly going to reflect the time and effort that most people put in, but it's more just to sort of say, look guys, like, it sucked for me too, but we're on the same team, and when we fail together, and when we succeed together. And I think they understand that. But yeah, so there are the 6 rings. Really proud in particular of these 2. This one has been mirrored so many times, much more than I anticipated. And the feedback's been great on them. Fee wise, as I mentioned, I like to keep them reasonable for pretty much everyone, at least somebody who can afford a mirror. So for this one, it is 100 divines. This one is 125. This one is 50. This one is 75. Or no, 70. This one is 70, and this one is 75. And that's about half the price that most TFT rings are. And I think, actually sort of funnily enough, they did eventually end up hitting the 7% attribute, +1 frenzy, and 20% crit multi. Is, I believe, technically the best in slot DPS implicit combination for a fully mirrored tornado shot Fizzbo character. But TFT actually put out 5 or 6 rings that had tier 3 crit multi on them, which I found to be a little bit disingenuous to their whole ethos of only putting out the best possible rings. And that actually brings me to one other craft I've been kind of working on in the low, and this is a pretty cool one too. It's not finished, obviously, as you can see, but we got the tier 1 crit multi there, the 7% dex, and you'll notice that I actually have frostbite on hit. Now, if you're confused as to how this was made, frostbite on hit is a delve mod, but it's also tagged as a caster mod. So what you do to get this is you buy a delve ring, the highest item level being 83 on those, and that's okay because we want to have at least item level 82 so that we can get tier 1 attributes, tier 1 chaos res if wanted. Actually, I think that's 81. But we're not actually going to need any mods that are 84, so 83 is fine. We're then going to do cannot roll caster mods and a null to isolate frostbite on hit, so it's the only suffix. After that, we craft suffixes cannot be changed, and we scour, and that will make it so that it is a magic item with just frostbite on hit. Following that, you then do, you can imprint if you'd like, or you can also just buy a bunch of frostbite on hit rings and just make sure it has 1 open suffix, and then after you actually hit the implicits, you can then do the first process I just talked about. Or if you'd like, you can just imprint and manually harvest synthesize until you get 3 implicits, which from my testing is about a 1 in 16 to a 1 in 20. I think, sorry, I've got too many tabs here, but let's see if I can find it. Sorry for the delay here. There we go. So you can see this is how many rings it took me to hit the 3 implicits, and all we're doing for that is synthesize an item giving random synthesized implicits. So either you can buy a bunch of them as I did here until you hit 3 implicits, or you can imprint it and then synthesize, and then if it doesn't hit 3 implicits, you go back and revert using the imprint and just repeat that process until you get 3 implicits. And then from there, obviously, you just use Vivid Vultures as you would otherwise. The one thing that I would distinguish between those is typically I'm never ever going to roll Vivid Vulture for the first mod. It's almost always going to be cheaper to just buy one mod on there. So like rather than trying to roll a Frenzy Charge or a Power Charge, if that's like the anchoring mod that you want in there, it's much cheaper typically to buy a 3 implicit ring that already has that one mod. So given that we wanted, that I wanted to put Frostbite on hit, it is a bit of a shot in the dark. However, lo and behold, about 25 vultures in, hit tier 1 crit multi, which is actually one of the rarest synthesis mods available on rings. It is amazing how long, how uncommon it is. Now sometimes people will get lucky anecdotally, whatever. I actually looked at the time, and there were 3 times as many power charge rings as there were tier 1 crit multi rings on 3 implicit bases, just to give you some perspective. But the third mod that I would need to hit here would be Frenzy Charge, which, and I mentioned this in the past, charges are the rarest mods. T1 crit multi might be actually, but there's no hard science on it, and I'll get to that in a bit. But charges on average are going to cost you thousands of vultures, plus to get it in that exact slot there. Basically, we're talking about double-digit mirror cost at the very least, and that's obviously going to go up as the price of beasts, crate chicks and vultures scales. Excuse me a sec. But I did put the Frostbite on hit there, which is something that no other ring actually in the game can touch. I don't think anyone has ever gone through the effort to actually do this. Obviously, Vivid Vultures have only existed for the past 2 leagues, so it would be a first of a kind. What you'd be sacrificing for this would be, in essence, so either T0 attribute or tier 1 crit multi. You can make the argument that tier 0 essence crit multi might actually even be better than Frostbite on hit, especially if you're gonna use Calandra's Touch. However, if you're at a state that you're going for a ring like this that's going to cost you double-digit mirrors no matter what to pursue it, it's very likely that you could afford to mirror 2 separate rings. At the very least, it would be one of a kind and a very cool craft, which believe it or not, to me is still an important part of this game. Anyways, that's kind of back burner right now, but kind of a cool project I thought I'd share with you guys as well. But yeah, they're the 6 rings, and so yeah, that's what I've been up to for the past roughly let's say 8 or 9 days, and just sort of starting to move on from that now, getting guildmates some currency, and moving on to my actual discharge character. Actually, I think I already did this here. So this slide says qualifying evidence to support my conclusions or advice hereafter. So I showed you all my crafts, show data, show thoroughness, and use this as a preface on how to synthcraft. I will show you a real quick look at the data here. You can see here over the course of me rolling, as I mentioned, I have information on 20,000 Vivid Vultures on rings. I would do things like this. So you can see mod 1, mod 2, total amount of vultures, rare beast, notable rolls, different ring base. All right, different project, notable rolls, time spent, different rolls, notable rolls, time spent, currency spent, vultures used. This one's for 2,000 vultures. This is from this league, total amount of mod prevalence, etc. So this is something I was very closely monitoring throughout the past 2 leagues, and has taken me countless amount of hours, and currency to keep track of. That's not meant to be like a flex or a look at how hard I work kind of thing. It's just to provide some context for the advice I'm about to give. Now, this is not a hard science, what I'm about to say. The reason for that is that the vast majority of crafting in Path of Exile can be directly codified to specific weightings, right? So you can go look on Craft of Exile and see exactly what a mod weighting is, and you can calculate, if you were to run that scenario an infinite amount of times, what the average currency cost would be. Now, that doesn't actually exist with synthesis, and the reason for that is because when synth was first added to the game, the way that it was on the synthesizer, it would choose based on a mod that you put into the item. It wasn't something that dropped right at a pool, right? It would be choosing on the basis of what item was put into the altar. So it didn't work in the traditional way as a mod pool would, because it's not pulling from a universal mod list. It was doing it based on a localized one. Similar to Dark Shrines League back in the day, if any of you played that, which, as a side note, my buddy Dignity just returned to the game, and him and I were catching up, shooting the shit. Both him and I, we used to stream and play together years ago, and we were kind of reminiscing over how much we both love Dark Shrines League. But anyways, I digress. That's why synth mods don't have mod waiting lists as other items do. Now, Vivid Vultures actually changed this because obviously there's now a universal pool that it has to draw from. However, those numbers or those values are not public in any way. I don't know if it's because they can't be data mined. I'm not very good on the tech side of things. I don't really know how that stuff works. But all I can say is that the actual weightings are not available. So there are a couple ways you can kind of inductively reason things. So you can look at relative mod prevalence. For example, you can roll, like 1,000 times on a ring, see which mod shows up the most common. So let's say it's arbitrarily 8% cold res, right? Let's say you hit that 25 times. So you think it's about a 1 in 40, right? Then you go look on the trade site, look up for all synth rings that have 8% or, that cold res. You see there's 1,000 of them, right? And then you go look up frenzy charge and you see there's 20 of them, right? And so there are 50 times as many cold reses as frenzy charges, and so you can kind of surmise in your head, okay, well, it's about 50 times as rare. I rolled it once every 40 mods. That means it roughly can kind of anticipate it taking maybe 2,000. Now, obviously, I'm going to get into more detail in this, but this is a kind of brief way you can ballpark just using data you collect yourself. But the only way to actually get this stuff kind of pegged down until it is able to be data mined or whatever that process is to just start pooling information. And so from the first day I started rolling vultures, I've been doing that. And I wanted to wait to make this video for a while because I didn't think that I had a large enough list yet to really speak with any kind of affirmative voice, or where I would feel good about, like, what I mean? Like, I don't want to present information that I feel to be disingenuous in terms of its merit. And as I mentioned, it's now been over 20,000 vultures carefully tracked over 2 leagues, and that now, with the 6 mirror rings I've crafted this league, over the past 2 leagues, I've now crafted 18 mirror items, and 14 of which have been rings. So I'm talking 3 implicits, 61, and all of them have been mirror serviced at least once. So I do think that I have a good basis to make the statements I'm about to. However, keep in mind, as a disclaimer, it's not a hard science. And there is one major flaw with any of the data that you're collecting with respect to this, is that if you're rolling a ring that has a power charge and a frenzy charge, and you're rolling for a 3rd implicit, that data set is going to skew the probability of rolling a charge, because obviously you can't roll a mod that exists there already, right? And so for the most part, the vast majority of the rings that I've been rolling throughout this process, both last league and this league, are either going to have a power charge, a frenzy charge, 7% dex, 7% int, or 7% strength already on them, which means it's going to disproportionately make the frenzy power 7%, 7%. Those are going to seem more rare, because obviously if they're already on there, it can't roll them. And there's no way to prevent that. The only way to actually truly do a purist test would be just to roll a ring over with vultures constantly, or to harvest synthesize things, ad infinitum, just to collect data. Now, I'm a big proponent of of accuracy, but I'm not that psychopathic. So, that is another disclaimer as well with respect to, uh, when we discuss these values here. So let's get this slideshow back up. View slideshow. All right, so there we go. So now we're going to talk about synth mods and how to get them. What's that process like? So discussion topics real quick. This last part of the video will probably take about 10-15 minutes. I'm going to be fairly brief here. But how do we get synth items? The number of implicits. Where do I find data on implicit options? Where can I find mod weightings? Have I collected any data? What's my favorite item to synthcraft? How many total mods, valuable mods, approximate odds? What are the caveats? Should I buy rings or roll them? Approximate cost, when to sell, crafting tricks, and which bases will actually get mirrored. And so back to the first part here, how to get synth items. Now, obviously, you can get them through the synthesis maps. If you're talking 3 implicits, it's Uber Cortex. You can get them through divination cards. You can get them through the harvest synthesis off the trade site, obviously. And I actually think that might be the exhaustive list there. Now, you can get synthesis items from Ritual. You can also get them from Heist. I don't think they can have 3 implicits, though. I might be wrong about that. I haven't done Heist since Heist League, unless it was for achievements. I hate Heist. And Ritual I've obviously done, but I can't think firsthand if you get 3 implicits there. In any case, though, primarily it's really irrelevant for most people. If you want to farm them, Uber Cortex. But if you do have a base, you specifically want to just make one yourself, either just go buy it off the trade site, or you can use the Harvest Synthesis if you have a drop-only mod like I demonstrated earlier. Now, one big thing that if you are a novice to synth crafting, especially with vultures, that maybe some people don't consider, the amount of implicits is of paramount importance. You should never, ever, ever, ever put a significant amount of currency into a ring that does not have 3 implicits. I cannot stress this enough. If you were to look at, let's say, a power charge ring where it is only the 1 power charge, or 7% dex or int or strength, or any of these good mods versus one with 3 implicits, you are talking 1/5 of the value when they're both white. And it completely eliminates it from the contention with respect to like a mirror ring. Now, if you just want to have it for self-use, whatever, that's fine. Have some fun, buy that ring, go ahead. But never, ever, ever skimp out on that 3rd implicit mod if you are actually rolling these with any desire to either produce a mirror item yourself, to sell it off as a mirror base, or to try and service that ring. It is dead in the water if it does not have 3. If you want to find data on these implicit options, the only up-to-date source I've ever actually seen is PoE DB. You go there, type Synthesis League. I can show you this real quick. PoE DB Synthesis. I don't know why you have to type Synthesis League, but you go to Synthesis League, and then you go down here to Synthesis. Where is it? Am I blind? Monster Gem Quest. Oh, there it is. Implicit. Synthesis implicit. And then you can type in whatever you want. So let's say it's a ring. Right? So we type in ring. And this is the only one I've seen that's up to date. There are other websites that show synth lists, but they're outdated completely. They show mods that don't exist. Blah, blah, blah. There's a couple mistakes on this one, but for the most part, it's solid. So that's where you should check out if you are interested in looking at that list. Maybe give it a bookmark if this is something you are, pursuing vigorously. Where can I find mod weightings? We already talked about that earlier. And have I collected any data? Also covered that. What is my favorite type of item to synthcraft and why? Now, you probably actually surmised this already, but for me, it's rings. If I didn't mention why, first of all, it's discharge. But secondly, and more importantly, probably for most of you guys, rings have a plethora of very good options. As well as permutations that can be mirrorable. If you're to look at something like a Fizzbow or a Quiver or something like that, they tend to have a very restricted mod pool in terms of what's desired. So like, or even a wand, like, you're going for things like Strength Stacker, Dex Stacker, Int Stacker, but, Explodey, +1 arrow, well, their +1 arrow doesn't exist anymore. If you're making a Fizzbow though, it's basically Fizz, attack speed, nothing else is fine. right? You just have this list of 3, so if you don't hit it, it's kind of zero sum game. Not really much fun to that. Now, when we're talking about rings, you have Power Charge, Frenzy Charge, Endurance Charge, 7% Dex, 7% Int, 7% Strength. Onslaught on hit, Intimidate on hit, Arcane Surge on hit, Elemental Weakness on hit, Vulnerability on hit, Frostbite on hit, Conductivity on hit. You have 7% spell, 6% spell damage per Power Charge, 4 to 7 cold damage per Frenzy Charge, Life Gain on hit by attacks, Poison, Bleed, and Ignites deal 10% damage, 10% faster. You've got Crit Multi, you've got Life, you've got ES. You know, the list goes on. There are probably at least 15 to 20 high value mods on rings, and so the different ways in which those can you know, match up and create something truly unique that has a use case, you know, maybe not necessarily for mirror service, but for a build or in a way where it is a completely novel item, far outweighs other items as well. It gives you pretty good odds of hitting, you know, something relatively decent without having to spend an arm and a leg. There are 241 total implicits on rings, however 107 unique ones. So 241 includes tiers. So for example, with crit multi, there's 12% crit multi, which is a tier 5, 13 to 14 tier 4, 15 to 16 tier 3, 17 to 18 tier 2, and 19 to 20 tier 1, right? So that's 5 implicits but only 1 unique one. So there are 107 unique ones but 241 total. And as I mentioned, about 15 of them are you know, are high value. That being said, though, the weights, they are weighted very heavily, very, very, very heavily. Things like just straight up damage type, so chaos damage, fire damage, cold damage, singular resistances. You'll get these all the time. Even life, actually, very, very common. But something like, you know, power charge, frenzy charge, you know, tier 1 crit multi. You're talking, from my data, upwards of 1,000 plus. It's actually anecdotally even higher than that, but as I mentioned, that's going to be skewed because a lot of the time I am rolling it with a pre-existing charge. You know, Onslaught, Intimidate, and Arcane Surge, roughly. Actually, I'll go over the values at the end of the video here, but we're talking pretty severe weightings compared to smaller ones. So when I say there's 241 mods / 107 unique ones, don't think that, you know, it means you're going to have a 1 in 107 chance of hitting the exact mod you want. That being said, if you do use 107 vultures, there's a pretty good chance you're going to hit one of those. In particular, the curse on hits are relatively common. And actually, the 6% dex, strength, and int are far more common than people think as well, I believe. All right, so total mods, how many valuable mods, went over that. What are the approximate odds? I'll actually do that at the end of the video. Caveats to the data, as I mentioned, my data is going to be somewhat skewed given the fact that I had a very specific type of mod rolling them. Oh, this is actually a really important part. If you're going to end up doing this and you want to try Vivid Vultures or Synthesis rolling, should you do it from scratch? Should you buy one with 1 good implicit, or should you buy it with 2 good implicits? And I really think that's going to come down to what your aim or your ambition is with that item. If you're trying to make something for self-use versus if you're trying to profit craft one just to make a base to sell, if you're trying to make a mirror base, if you're trying to bring something back to standard to recombinate, or if you're trying to make like a 61 mirror item to get fucking service to hell, baby. These are obviously going to have different, you know, different ambitions, different goals. Are going to have different underlying, you know, the best way to pursue those is going to be different. In general, I would say that you should pretty much always, if you're going to put any significant amount, anything over 30, 40 divines, I would recommend you buy one with at least 1 good implicit on there. If you can find one with 2, great, but those tend to be very, very expensive. For example, you can get a 3 implicit ring with 7% dex, strength, or int for up until this point in the league, roughly 20 to 30 divines. However, if you want to get one with two of them, either, you know, two of either dex, strength, or int percent, you're talking 300 divines, a mirror kind of thing, right? And so you're talking, you know, 10, 15 times the cost. And you know, that's reflected amongst different mods as well. So again, it's really going to line up with your priorities. You maybe get your feet wet, just try rolling it yourself. It's really not that hard to get a singular good mod. So if you really just want to, you know, Vivid Vultures have gone up in the past week by about double their price. That was obviously something that was pretty easy to forecast. Vivid Vultures being like 0.5 divines or 0.4 divines after almost like a month in the league was actually pretty absurd. But they're still relatively cheap, especially, you know, looking at through the lens of last league. I think they're about 1.4, 1.5 divs right now. And the good thing is too, if you're rolling just the first mod, you don't have to worry about crate check chimeras, and that's obviously basically doubles the cost. And that brings me to my next point: the approximate cost of vultures and crate checks. If you have one mod that you are rolling, so you buy a ring that, let's say, has a power charge on it, 3 implicits, right? That means on average, for every 3 vultures you spend, you are going to remove one. Well, you're going to remove the power charge once, right? So that means the ratio you're going to need is 3 vultures to 1 crate check chimera. Now, obviously, sorry, I should mention this as well. If you're just rolling the first mod, so you buy just a 3 implicit ring with 3 garbage implicits, obviously the ratio is you need 0 crate checks. But once you have that one good mod on there, 3 vultures to 1 crate check, because again, one out of every 3 rerolls is going to remove that good mod. When you start rolling the third mod, right? So you get 2 good mods and you're rolling that third one. This is when it gets very expensive, because for every 3 vultures you use, only one of them is going to remove the desired mod, which means you need 2 crate chicks and 3 vultures to change 1 implicit 1 time, right? So even right now, crate chicks being about 1.8 divines and vultures being 1.5, that means to roll 1 synthesis mod 1 time out of a list of 241 total modifiers, which are very heavily weighted, you're going to be spending 4.5 divines in vultures and 3.6 divines in crate chicks. So that's 8.1 divines to change 1 mod 1 time. And now, obviously, if you were equally weighted and you wanted a specific mod, let's say it's 1 in 241, and again, it wouldn't be that because they're very heavily weighted. We're talking 1,600, 1,800 divines. That's what, about 6 mirrors to get that 1 mod, and it's actually even higher than that because they're, you know, typically the mod you're going to be looking out for is going to be one of those more heavily or less weighted mods, I should say. So I very, very highly recommend steering clear of going after that third mirror tier mod unless you're doing it right at the beginning of the league when they're super, super cheap, or unless you have pretty deep pockets. But I don't want to have any illusions about you know, the cost here or the ease. There's really not too much nuance to it with respect to technique or anything like that. You know, it is pretty RNG oriented. But there are a couple little things you can you do to stack the odds in your favor, and I'll explain that in a second here. When to sell or continue, kind of touched on that already, but it's gonna really come down to what your prerogatives are, what your budget's like, and you know, what your ambitions are with that item. So crafting tricks. All right, here is the only one that really matters, and this can actually save you a shit ton of money on something like a Fizzbow. And this is something that is actually fairly unknown. If you have this same mod, if you have a mod in the wrong tier on an item, you can forego the process of doing the 1 in 3. So for example, here, actually, we'll bring it back here. Perfect example. So you see on the Fizzbow I'm rolling, we've got tier 1 attack speed on the implicit, but that's tier 2 fizz damage and tier 3 fizz damage %, right? However, so if you have, so we have the 3 correct mods. These are the right mods we want, but there are 2 of them are in the wrong tier. Now, many people would be inclined to just keep the best mod at any given time. However, that's incorrect. If you have it like this, where you have the 3 right mods, but in the wrong tiers, you never have to go through that process of doing the 1 in 3 or the 2 in 3, where the mod has to fall in the right one. Because, for example, if I were to use a vulture and it were to roll tier 1 fizz damage flat, the only place that it can go is on above or on the tier 2 flat fizz damage, because no item can have the same mod 2 times, right? So it can't replace the fizz percentage, and it can't replace the attack speed, because then it would have fizz flat twice. Obviously that's not possible, so that means that all you have to do in that situation is roll the desired mod 1 time. Now, there's very niche situations where this is applicable, In rings, the only one that I can really think of where tiers are that important is crit multi. But it is actually very, very impactful on something like a weapon, in particular a fizz weapon, where you have very specific mods like this that the tiers of them is very, very important. You do end up using a lot more crate chicks, obviously, because you're not going to be chaining vultures together. If you use a vulture and it doesn't pick one of those 3 mods, then you have to crate chick it back to hold on to it. But obviously you can balance the cost benefit there. That is the only hack, so to speak, with respect to synth items. The only other thing I could say that can really tilt the odds or scales in your favor is to have a rough idea of what the weightings are. And how long are we at? An hour and 10 minutes. Fucking every video I makes an hour and 10 minutes. But anyways, staying true to form. Sorry. Oof, lots of talking. I'll now reveal what I'm sure many of you are here to listen to. On the basis of 20,000 vultures on rings, I'm now going to present you with my rough estimates of how many it takes. Now, again, not an exact science, but this is probably the best data that you will have on this in the game at the moment. So, hope this helps. It took a lot of time and a lot of currency to narrow this down. All right, so total implicits 241, 107 different implicits, as I mentioned. For a +1 charge, we are talking 1,000 plus. I have rolled +1 charge only 4 times out of the 20,000, so it's really hard to say, but as I mentioned, the data is skewed given the fact that the vast majority of those rings did already have a charge on them. Onslaught, Intimidate, or Arcane Surge on hit, approximately 1 in 500. 7% Strength, Dex, or Int, approximately 1 in 250. Any curse on hit, with the exception of Elemental Weakness, 1 in 100. For some reason, and I don't know if it's just purely anecdotal, LE Weakness is a mod that I have only rolled 1 time while making rings. And if we go look at the data here for the last 2,000, for example, we can see here we hit Conductivity 4 times, Flammability 4 times, Frostbite 3 times, Vulnerability 4 times, and LE Weakness 0. And that's just on the last 2,000, but that has been reflected on when looking at it from a grander scale as well over the cumulative data. Again, even 20,000 being probably the largest sample size available is not infallible, and in the grand scheme of actual variance is rather meaningless. So take that with as you will. But yes, approximately 1 in 100 vultures to hit a curse on hit. For X per charge, so cold damage per frenzy charge, spell damage per power charge, life regen per endurance charge, etc. Approximately 1 in 100. To get a life roll, life percentage, about 1 in 50. To get X damage, deals damage faster, so poison, bleed, or ignites deal damage 10% faster, 1 in 500. Aura effect, so determination aura effect, discipline aura effect, or grace aura effect, approximately 1 in 250. For crit multi, we're talking about 1 in 50 to 1 in 75, but that's only for tier 5 or tier 4. So tier 5 being 12% crit multi, tier 4 being 13 to 14% crit multi. You see that approximately once every 50 to 75 vultures. But once you start getting to tier 3, maybe 1 in 150, 200. Tier 2, I'd say 500. And tier 1, I'd say that's right up there with a charge, where for me at least, through what I've collected, it's upwards of 1 in 1,000. And this one actually would not have been skewed, because I never actually had that as my first mod on a ring, with the exception of that one that I showed you there with the Frostbite on hit from Delve. And so I would never have had that being a skewed data set. Another thing to consider too, there are certain, I don't know if this actually shows there, yeah. You see how I've got certain mods marked down as secondary and carry. With respect to, if you're going to purchase a ring with 3 implicits, and it's already going to have a good mod on there, by my estimate, there are only 5 mods that are actually worthwhile to do this for. That are Power Charge, Frenzy Charge, 7% Dex, Int, or Strength. Now, you can maybe make an argument for Onslaught, Arcane Surge, or Intimidate as well, but that would really be the exhaustive list. When I say this, I'm looking at it more through the lens of mirror crafting, not personal use or resale. But with the exception of those 5, maybe those 8, you're better off really just rolling for them. And I refer to those as carry mods because once you have those are, ones that are worth imprinting to hold on and then going from there. And the last thing I wanted to say is if you are going to go for the mirror route, you have to try to remove yourself from looking at the item for the item's sake itself. Sometimes you can make incredibly sick rings. Just to point to a couple again here. Something like this 7/7 onslaught or 7% dex frenzy onslaught, where that is obviously a super sick combination of mods. This is very unlikely to get mirrored because the mirror market is a very, very, very niche beast, right? You're talking about guys who are predominantly using Omni TS, who are largely RMTing and are largely doing this to flex on PoE Ninja. I know that's maybe a sad statement, but I've done hundreds and hundreds of mirror services, and I would say about 80% of them have, need 10 or 15 minutes to, 10 or 15 minutes to get a mirror from their friend. And also the vast majority of them happen around the hours, Asiatic hours. That's not a xenophobic statement or anything, but more so just an observation, in particular Koreans. I think that's just a cultural thing with gaming. But if you are looking to get something mirrored or to put something up for mirror service, try to remember that it's not necessarily about what is good independently for your build or what is a cool combo or a rare combo. The two things you should really consider are, you can just sort of think about it logically. What's the first thing anyone's ever going to mirror? It's probably going to be a weapon, right? And so then if you know that about 75% of all weapons or all mirrors period are used on either a Fizzbow or an Ellie and both of those use Omni, you could stand to reason that, okay, I can make this cool ring for I don't know, like Stormbrand, okay, or whatever. Shout out to Z-Boobs. But, realistically, if you go for that niche ring, you're immediately cutting off 75% of the market. Not only that, but the 75% most frivolous part of the market, because a lot of those guys, unfortunately, are doing so through auspicious means, largely through RMT. And that's not to say that everyone does. I think very cool case for someone doing mirror service for me is a streamer / content creator guy. Oh god, why am I blanking on his name? He does magic finding Crimson Temples constantly. Anyways, I don't know. Snoobe. I know that he mirrors a bow every league because he does magic finding Crimson Temple like just vigorously over and over again in the same way that I craft over and over again. And like he gets that mirror bow because obviously magic fine gear is kind of garbage, right? Like stat wise, right? It's not very good. And so like having that weapon is basically a carry for him to serve a function. Like to me that's super cool, right? Like for me right now I'm actually working. I forgot to show you guys this. I'm working on a mirror discharge weapon. So you can see I actually made this on day 2 of the league. This is for 100% chance to not consume discharge. But I'm not going to go throughout the league without making like the best ever discharge weapon, obviously, right? And like to me, that's just super cool, right? Or this ring, again, this ring's been mirrored 18 times. This one's only been mirrored 3 times. It's obviously more niche, even though it's more rare, because this one, targets Omni, and this one targets, in particular, I crafted this for discharge, although there's other builds that could use it. I think that that's an awesome case, and that's also why I like to craft items that are maybe not necessarily always in that vein. Even though I do have the recognition that the serviceable market is not there. And that's one of the things that distinguishes, the approach that I have from TFT as well, right? Is that I do actually just have a love of the craft and I love of the build too. I mean, plus I actually craft my items. I don't just, I'm not like a fucking record label to a musician. But anyways, don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I feel like I feel like I kind of covered everything I need to there. What bases will actually get mirrored, and what am I planning next? Hey, time will tell. I've been streaming a lot on YouTube, guys. I actually found out recently, about a few weeks ago, that I never actually monetized my YouTube channel. That was part of the reason, not the whole reason, but part of the reason that I hadn't made videos in a little while. I was obviously pretty discouraged about that. I do need to financially support myself, and you know, finding out that I'd gone through all that effort and all that stuff, and there was no reward financially on the back end. That was a little discouraging at times, but you know, kind of sucked it up, figured it out. Recently got it monetized, so hooray for me. But obviously, I did get deplatformed off Twitch again. It's a complete bullshit reason. Apparently, I got bot reported or mass reported for trying to use malicious software to steal people's data. If you've ever seen me use a computer, you would know that this is completely out of the question, as I'm somewhat of a Luddite. But also, like, why would I ever do that? If you ever watch me stream, the only links I ever have are to like my mirror thread anyways. Problem with Twitch, though, of course, is that if you get a ban like that, the appeal process takes like 2 months for them to even open an appeal. So, you know, for as long as people are able to weaponize that ban process, it's unlikely I'll ever be back on Twitch. So I've been streaming on YouTube. It's a little less formalized than it has been on Twitch in the past. I kind of come and go and just sort of explain things and play as I will. Maybe not as interactive as you guys are used to in the past for those of you who've been around for a while, but I'm sure it's a role I'll figure out and sort of step into, especially now that, you know, the game has never been primarily about money for me, but naturally, you know, it's a requirement to live. So the amount of hours I put into, you know, to streaming and into playing are not infinitely sustainable. So hopefully you can figure something out on that end. But yeah, we're going to be playing some Discharge, getting some crafts, figuring out some stuff with the guild, and you know, trying to have as great a time as we can. And I'll try and make some more videos, guys. I know this was a long one, probably right around an average for me, but long in general. Hope you're able to take something for it. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. Put a link to my Discord below. You guys are welcome to ask anything you want there. And looking forward to see you guys in break class. Peace.